USA, the land of hopes and dreams. Dreams, because that's the only place the USA will actually perform from a footballing perspective.
Can the US win?
The USA crashed out of the CONCACAF Nations League thanks to a semi-final defeat to Panama, a nation that's only ever qualified for the World Cup once. But I'm sure they at least got a medal out of the situation. No. The sheer resources and the personnel that the USA have, finishing 4th in the Nations League is an unmitigated disaster. Especially after 4th in the Gold Cup back in 2023 and a group stage exit from Copa America in 2024. But this is the thing, their coach actually has shampoo in his bathroom now. They're a global superpower and they've got ballers as well.
He's like the LeBron James of soccer.
Definitely.
So why exactly are the US bad at football? It's about here, by the way, I should clarify I'm talking about soccer, which honestly, them calling it that is reason enough for me to want them to suffer at the hands of a nation that the average Millwall supporter has never heard of. What the fuck is a Nicaragua? Wait. What did you call me? The US are in fact probably the only people that actually play their version of football. I've actually just realized, oh my days, this is the reason why they're suffering soccer-wise instead. NFL players have wavy names and football players don't.
Here they are. Team Twat.
Are you telling me they wouldn't have won the Nations League with a player called Shaw Ferguson? Ha ha Clinton Dix. General Booty. That's just a position, bro. Meanwhile, the US men's national team have a player called Brian White in their squad. Yeah, no, impossible. You're losing from the start. 7,000 likes, I'll legally change my name to Shaw Ferguson. Subscribe as well, it really does help me out. The YouTube algorithm's got less consistency than the US men's national team, so you know that it's bad, so any help is appreciated. But who are the main characters that are supposed to be helping out the US men's national team? Well, let's take a look at their squad before we get into the meat of this. Pause. And there's really only one place to start.
Definitely.
Yeah, man, that's the LeBron James of soccer if it's LeBron actually trying to get lyrics of a song right. Christian Pulisic, let's be honest, is a star CONCACAF player. When you look at the rest of the squads, when you look at the rest of the teams that actually are involved in either the CONCACAF Nations League or the CONCACAF Gold Cup, or in terms of that part of World Cup qualifying, Christian Pulisic, whatever you think of him, is one of the better players, one of the star players in that. He's had times of inconsistency during the course of his career. He's had times of frustration, especially whilst he was playing at Chelsea. But he's been imperative for Milan this season in Serie A and helping them win the Supercoppa versus their sworn enemies Inter. He's undoubtedly been pretty decent this season and should definitely be performing, if not slapping teams aside on his own whilst playing for the US. That's a serious right winger, and that's just his political beliefs. Timothy Weah, who of course has been involved in the US national team for a while, son of George, being converted to be a right back recently. Don't ask me, I don't know how that happened. A 22-year-old Yunus Musa is a regular starter for Milan. Anthony Robinson has been arguably top 2 left backs in the Premier League this season. 10 assists in the league for Fulham. He's arguably due a pretty big move after this season, and is one of the key reasons why Fulham have been performing so well in the league. Gio Reyna's parents don't have anyone to blackmail. What did you call me? So he's in the side as well these days. That's good. You got Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams in midfield. Chris Richards, Carter Vickers, and Tim Ream in defence. Unfortunately, Matt Turner in goal. It's all names you've heard before, right? These are decent players that we've seen play in some of the top 5 leagues in Europe. And they're managed by a man who guided Tottenham to a Premier League title fight and a Champions League final. They're Tottenham, so they didn't really go any further than that. Mauricio Pochettino, of course, is a man that also looked like he was starting to turn the tide with Chelsea last season before kind of unfairly, in my eyes, being sacked by the Blues. He's undoubtedly a manager with high pedigree, certainly more than the man that went before him, Greg Berhalter. He may have built a decent culture around the US men's national team in terms of the players interacting with each other, and he may have had a good win percentage, but he was lambasted for his squad selection, lambasted for having no hair, and they were actually never able to perform outside of CONCACAF, hence, you know, relatively poor performances at the World Cup, a shocking display at the Copa America. I mean, it's all well and good slapping up teams like Haiti and Belize. I don't even know if that's how you pronounce Belize, I'm not gonna... Belize. But not once did he ever, in his 6 years in charge, beat a team in the top 25 of the FIFA World Rankings that wasn't in CONCACAF. So he never beat a top 25 team from Europe or from South America. Never once did he create any kind of upset in the World Cup. And as I mentioned, he flopped at the 2023 Gold Cup, flopped badly at the 2024 Copa America, after telling his team about a goal that would have taken them through from a different game, only for them to then concede seconds later. So when the US men's national team announced Mauricio Pochettino as their new boss, for US fans, it was like having a torture device removed from your skull and being taken to Disneyland instead. But it was Poch who was looking for a fairy tale ending, suggesting that he believes the US can win the World Cup being held partly by the US in 2026. It's a brave suggestion from the Argentine, I've gotta say.
I say big goals.
Look, I'm not being funny, okay? There might be a lot of people in the US, it's seen as a global superpower, and it definitely is, okay? Leader of capitalism, all that jazz. has. But their best achievement as a footballing side at a World Cup so far ever in their history is a quarter-final in 2002. Well, actually, no. There was a semi-final in 1930, but there were only about 6 nations in the world back then. Any team that calls up Matt Turner is not winning a World Cup, bro. According to Maurizio, Donald Trump would himself be helping and assisting in the US winning that World Cup. We love a bit of propaganda, don't we? What the heck is Donald Trump gonna do in this situation? He's not rising at the back stick to nod in a back post header. To be fair, his son might, the absolute freak of nature. The only thing he might consider doing is building a wall for a free kick. But even then, that's unlikely to actually end up happening. So with delusion levels rising and spirits high, it was time for a CONCACAF Nations League tournament to begin, and for Maurizio Pochettino to prove himself as US boss. They faced Jamaica in the quarterfinals and won 1-0. Mason Holgate got himself a red card for Jamaica and then suspended for the second leg, which meant it was advantage Jamaica going into the second leg. But the US overcame this to win 4-2 and then 5-2, of course, on aggregate. And now, like Elon Musk when he sees Donald Trump around the White House, it was time for a semi. Ironically, against the side on the rise, Panama. Okay, now, these lot don't sound as if they're a team that should be doing well. Ultimately, in my entire life as a footballing fan, not once have I ever assumed that Panama were going to make a major tournament. But back in 2018, we actually faced them, England, in the group stages. They ended up going out pretty convincingly, but even reaching that tournament was a massive breakthrough moment. And that's been followed by somewhat of a golden generation for them. They were runners-up in the last Gold Cup that was hosted. They finished 4th in the last 2 Nations Leagues. These aren't things that are absolutely mind-blowing for, you know, most countries, I guess. But for Panama, this is sensational stuff. This is probably the best they've been, footballing-wise. Either way, for reasons that I can only imagine come down to CONCACAF making up the rules as they go along, the quarterfinals may have been a 2-legged affair, but the semi-finals only 1, which meant there was no room for errors for the USMNT. Yeah, they conceded to a 94th minute winner, and then their goal scorer went and celebrated with American television in front of one of their biggest footballing heroes ever. Clint Dempsey's fist was ready to "you don't know where I'm from, dog," in one of the coldest moments probably in Panama's footballing history, as a man with a genuine first name of Cecilio sent Panama fans into raptures and US fans into depression. Immediately, there and then, eliminated from a tournament that they should at least be reaching the final of every single year. I mean, realistically, right, you've got the US, you've got Canada, you've got Mexico. The US and Mexico over the last sort of couple of decades have been pretty evenly matched, though Mexican football has kind of fallen off for me in the last 5 years, to a point that realistically the US should be winning pretty much all of these tournaments, apart from maybe 1 in 4, where you'd give an equal opportunity to Canada or Mexico. Being defeated by Panama was, no offense to Panama at all, I genuinely mean this from the bottom of my heart, but was a disaster. And that is meant from the perspective of when you compare these two nations, obviously footballing wise, but also like just the greater resources that the US should be able to pull from when it comes to their aspirations footballing wise. Compared to Panama, it's a total mismatch. I'm sure there was tension in the Reina household, Giovanni getting home after fucking up the entire US system for the year. To be honest with you, speaking of them, Maurizio Pochettino will be concerned when he gets a knock on the door from Gio's dad because he's not playing. Meanwhile, Josh Sargent is a different animal every time he plays for the US men's national team, and it's a bad animal. I'm talking like a naked mole rat, bruv. This guy in front of goal is a shambles. I don't care if he's doing well for Norwich domestically. His list of crimes during that entire international break alone get him sent to jail. He's got prison immediately. But at least there was a chance for redemption. No. They lost to Canada in the 3rd place playoff as well, bruv. Before you'd even had the chance to count all 23 people in attendance in the stands, their game was wrapped and they finished 4th in the CONCACAF Nations League. Maurizio Pochettino's full-time team talk not sparing anybody.
And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. Y'all are trash.
There'll be questions as to why they lost these games. I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't watch either of them live. I didn't watch the semi-final because I thought they beat Panama, and I didn't watch the 3rd place playoff because it's a 3rd place playoff. But having watched extended highlights of both, and I will clarify that because if I am wrong, then feel free to tell me in the comments section, but I've watched a decent amount of the US in international breaks before, right? And they just seemed quite slow and lethargic and seemingly uninterested. It's a weird spot that the US national team seems to find itself in because there's like a whole tournament about to happen. The biggest footballing tournament in the world, right? It's literally called the World Cup, okay?
3 Super Bowls a day for a month. That's what it is. That's what it is.
There's no mistake in it. It's a pretty big deal, all right? And even though they've got a really good manager, you know, in relation to previous US managers, okay, like getting Maurizio Pochettino is a big steal. That's a big situation, yeah? You don't usually get managers that have achieved quite a lot in the European space go over to America and become their men's national team coach, yeah? So that is a big deal. He's a good manager with proven pedigree. This is bad. This is actually legitimately quite a bad start. start, and the performances should be concerning given there's only a year until these guys are facing off in the biggest stage of all in front of their families and their cousins and their second cousins in the crowds, okay? It's a big deal, okay? These lot have got free tickets and they'll still want to be refunded if they see performances like that at the World Cup. So why? What's happening? Well, I think personally it comes down to three things. First thing, kind of already talked about there, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know how to solve it. It's a mental issue. I don't know what it is about this squad. You know, I don't follow them like to the level that I follow England, obviously, to know exactly what's going on in everybody's lives, but they don't seem that interested. From the performances that I saw at the Gold Cup here, from performances I've seen of the US recently, like at Copa America, which was a shambles, by the way, they just don't seem up for it. You know, you can watch a team sometimes and they seem a bit punchy, but they'll lose. The US are not that. If you can even remotely outwork the US at the moment, you're gonna beat them, I think. If you've got a little bit of talent to go alongside it, you don't have to be better than the US men's national team to beat them. And that was a thing under Berhalter as well. They didn't beat teams that were better than them. And I think that's a big indicator of what a team is actually like. If a team can't beat other teams that are better than them even once, it means I haven't got that dig deep ability, again, maybe pause, to overcome the odds, to be the underdogs in a story, to go above and beyond and win a game based on something more than just footballing ability, because they don't have the footballing ability, so they lose. Not even once beating a team that is like ranked higher than you in the FIFA World Rankings is absolutely abysmal during a 6-year spell. That to me shows a little bit in terms of the identity of the squad that you're dealing with. And again, as I've said, I don't really know how you solve that. Hopefully for them, Maurizio Pochettino can build some kind of, you know, winning mentality into them. But then again, he's a man that also didn't really win that much during his managerial time at Tottenham and Chelsea, for example. The second thing is, I actually don't think this team is as good as we maybe perceive it to be. And I know that goes against some of the stuff that I've said so far. They should still be beating Panama pretty handsomely. But I'm going to be honest with you, I think a lot of us European fans probably look at a team that has like Weston McKennie in and Tyler Adams and Cameron Carter-Vickers and Gio Reyna is like the perfect example. And you look at these players and go, oh, these lot were like 83 rated on FIFA like 4 years ago. They were playing for Juventus or Borussia Dortmund or whatever. They must have been class. I don't think they still are. I'm going to be so real. Gio Reyna's had about 4 years where he's not played consistently at all. He went to Forest on loan and did nothing there. Weston McKennie went on loan to Leeds and was pretty underwhelming. Has gone back to Juve and is not bad, but how good is Weston McKennie these days? He'd probably start for like a mid-table Premier League team, if we're being honest, but is that much better than what Mexico and Canada have? Probably not. They're kind of average defensively anyway on paper, same for in goal. So I think this team is like a little bit overhyped. Christian Pulisic, he's good, isn't he? But he's not a world-class, world-beater, Ballon d'Or contending LeBron James of soccer, really. You've got a team that doesn't have that steal, doesn't actually have probably as much ability as we maybe think it does, but also on top of that, and fair play, by the way, to Maxwell, friend of the channel, who's already made a video on his woe of being American and dealing with this American team, yeah. And he talked about the pay-to-play situation, and I think that, to me as well, I've said this before actually, but I think this is actually the most important thing as well. If you don't know already, you can't just play football in America. If you want to play for, you know, for actual teams and be coached, you have to pay money for, you know, coaching fees, administration fees, whatever. You can't just turn up with some shin pads and play for your local academy. Well, no, you can't do that in the UK, but you know what I mean? You can't play youth football for free, whereas you can here. You could get scouted having played a grand total of like, I don't know, £60 on football boots and shin pads in your entire life. You could end up in Arsenal's academy because you're just really good at football age 7. That's not a thing in America. Sometimes you have to pay up to $10,000 per year just to be actually coached anything. That's not even necessarily good coaching. It's just coaching of a kind. Now, according to the Sports and Fitness Industry Association back in 2018, they found that more than 70% of children within the pay-to-play system came from households who earned like $50,000 or more a year. 33%, so a third, came from households making over $100,000 a year. Now, you don't need to be an economical expert to know that's quite a lot of, you know, families that aren't making the cut there. A lot of families don't earn 100K, right? Certainly less than a third of the population in America. So a third of US footballers are coming from a very small percentage of the overall population. To back that up, the median household income for the US in that year, 2018, is $61,000. For Hispanic households, it's more like $51,000, and for black households, it's more like $41,000. If you're under 25, the median income was just $33,000. So that is a ridiculous amount of kids and of young adults, generally speaking, who already already off the bat probably aren't going to be able to afford the pay-to-play method and aren't going to be able to play football and be coached properly, even if they're really good at it, which means a massive amount of American talents are lost before you even get to the grassroots system. Like, if you were to compare that to, you know, players who play for England, okay, there's very obvious stories of success stories from like a working class background in England or in the UK, like Wayne Rooney, very highly documented, came from probably one of the roughest estates in Liverpool. If pay to play existed in England, right, and it required families to pay 10,000 quid every single year for Wayne Rooney to play football, his entire youth like career, he ain't making it. We don't ever get Wayne Rooney. We don't ever see him play for Manchester United. We don't ever see him swear at England supporters at the 2010 World Cup. Or was it 2014? I think it was 2014. We don't get Street Striker, the TV show. Do you know how much of a disaster that would be? Robbie Fowler, the exact same, but in terms of more, you know, current history, Harry Kane comes from a working class background. Jack Grealish does in Birmingham. Bukayo Saka's parents were immigrants that came to the UK. Raheem Sterling, a very similar story, but coming from Jamaica. Marcus Rashford's mum was a single parent, paving the way for him to have his career. Phil Foden came from a rough background, though was paid for by Manchester City to go through their academy. But generally speaking, like, a lot of England's first team comes from a working class background. Football as a whole, generally in the UK, is actually seen as a very working class sport. It's not like polo or rugby, where you've got people coming from private schools. A lot of the players that you see play for England come from public schools, and even though £10,000 doesn't maybe sound like a lot in comparison to 100 grand, it certainly is in comparison to the average wage in the UK. Like, Wayne Rooney's mum is not dedicating £10,000 in a year for Wayne Rooney to maybe make it as a footballer. Like, it's just not realistic. So you've now ended up with this entirely elitist system in America, where if you don't have the money, that is it. Your dreams are done from the rip. There's so many sports that are like that, where you definitely do miss out on potential talent because of finances. I work in the motorsport industry, I guess, as well, and that's exactly the same there too. The costs of that mean that the average person has absolutely no dreams or aspirations of being a Formula 1 driver or being a racer of any kind. That as a method or as a system is fucked. Genuinely, it's so I couldn't believe it when I found out a couple of years ago. So I ultimately do think, in terms of like actually a limited pool compared to the actual infrastructure and the sheer population of the US, you know, interest levels are rising. You've probably got kids from working class backgrounds or lower income families that do genuinely want to be involved in football, but they can't. They can't be, because it's seen as elitist in the US, and I think that's one of the major issues, if not the most fundamental issue, in why the US are not good at football. It doesn't have a massive bearing necessarily on why Christian Pulisic isn't playing well enough or why Timothy Weah's a right back now. This current crop of players probably aren't affected, apart from maybe their mentality's slightly different. Maybe that's why they don't dig deep against bigger teams. I don't know, because they've come from like a silver spoon background. Kind of harsh to assume, so maybe that's not the case. But either way, factually speaking, the US would have access to better players if pay to play did not exist. And that, to me, is why the US are bad at football. But what do you make of it, and why do you think the US are underachieving at the moment? Is Christian Pulisic ever gonna be the LeBron James of soccer? Drop it down below. And if you're from the US, what do you make of Maurizio Pochettino and the squad right now? If you did enjoy this video though, feel free to slap a like on the video, and of course subscribe if you're new to the channel. As I mentioned, it massively helps me out if you do that. So yeah, really appreciate it if you do. You can also follow me on social media. It is at @theofficialfng on Twitter, Insta, and on TikTok. But it's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a wonderful day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.